Greetings, you happily miserable accursed. It's Herle here with Leichnitz, Teneycke, and Reid, none of whom has a nickname anywhere as descriptive that I'm aware of as the Big Dumper. Anybody watching baseball?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
big dumper.
Jordan, there's a guy who plays for the wrong team whose nickname is the Big Dumper.
Seems unfortunate.
Because he has a
Yeah.
giant ass. His big giant ass. And you know how like real great sports stars tend to be like the sun shines off of them and they're really good looking and all that, and good luck just follows them, Jordan. This
Yeah.
guy is this guy's country ugly. He looks like something you drag behind the combine. It's unbelievable. And his ass
Those
is as
bold
big as
words
New
from someone
Brunswick.
coming from
It's-
Belleville there.
You betcha. Yeah, Country Ugly was my nickname, as a matter of fact. But yeah, it's and he looked so sad last night when he struck out for the final time. He just sat on the bench. It was like he couldn't remember ever having a friend. I hope that carries into tonight's final game.
Are you excited, Scott, about this? Are you juiced up about the Jays?
I am. I've been paying close attention, watching the games. The boys are excited. We went to the opening game, Sammy and I, a week ago.
So what's going to happen? Are they going to win?
I like our chances, knock on wood. You know, you hate to jinx them, but our bats are
come
cracking.
on. You can't know. It's one game. It's a crapshoot.
But you can jinx it. You can walk on the wrong side of the superstition. And so, you know, oh, yeah, I guarantee we're going to win. And then you're just saying to the baseball
I'm just
gods,
taunting him,
prove me
David.
wrong. I'm hopeful.
Well, I'm just killing time before we get into this because you two are in so much trouble.
Okay.
Because I'm
Who's
in
you two?
Saskatchewan right now,
There's
and I'm
three of
getting
us.
stronger by the minute. I'm close to the source, and I have feeling the power
gonna
emerging.
ask you.
Kory's in
Charging
Saskatchewan
up.
too.
I'm also in Saskatchewan.
Yeah, so the
although
two of
it's
us-
a city.
no.
Oh, no. Oh, man.
Yeah.
You guys, it's like when Superman, right, is, you know, in the Fortress of Solitude, he gains stamina
Exactly
and
what's
power.
happening.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. I get
Well.
it. Well, we're looking forward to some phenomenal interventions here in the pod then, you two Saskatchewan super rights.
Yep. Powered by canola oil. Let's do it.
That's right.
All right, so what are we going to talk about today? We have to talk about Poilievre. I don't really want to, we talked about him so much for so long, but we have to talk about him again because he makes himself newsy. I guess the only question we'll ask is why did he do what he did in that interview about the RCMP and Trudeau. Our cursed clipping this week, just to keep it in the family, is an excerpt from my interview with Rahm Emanuel on the Hurley Burley, where he had some tough talk for Canada, and maybe sounded like the world was going to be different for Canada, no matter who the president of the United States was. And then in response, surely, to our repeated bleatings about this, Prime Minister Carney announced some crime and bail measures last week that will be coming in legislative form this week, and we'll talk about whether or not they respond to the political imperative.
You think it was us? You think we're the one that tipped it? It wasn't the rash of guys on bail slaughtering people in the streets, or the fact that you can't park your car and run in and get a coffee and without, the risk that when you come back it's gone. It was.
No, I don't think an issue really rises to the level where the government pays
Fair.
attention to it until it gets discussed on this show.
Right.
Right.
You got to come through the
Exactly.
the
Jordan?
politics.
I'm good.
Jordan, start paying attention. I know it's been baseball and then Saskatchewan
God,
and then
it's-
Forest.
sorry, I
That's on my
hear-
phone.
I hear fucking sport things and I'm out,
You fucking three men, blah blah blah, on and on. Jesus.
Oh no, I
Christ,
speak
whatever it
not
is
for my gender. Like, let me be very clear. Many of my female friends are very into baseball and sports. It's
I wasn't
just not me.
restricting it to baseball.
I do
just
only
get
one
tired of us.
sport. That sport is politics. So I'm here for that.
All right. Well, let's go to your first sport then. And let's start off with you and say, so, I mean, if anybody's unaware, Pierre Poilievre did an interview with some non-mainstream news or information site, and was talking about how Justin Trudeau should have been jailed for going to the Aga Khan's place and for SNC-Lavalin. And the only reason that he wasn't is because the RCMP are in cahoots with him and colluded. So, substantively, it's, of course, all nonsense, and who cares? about it. But the question is, why does he do it? And so um, a lot of people are speculating that it's a leadership review play for him, and that he understands that the general public doesn't want to hear him talk about these kinds of things. Because, boy, I think the general public's moved on from Trudeau. Like, I don't know that anybody wants to really hear any talk about Trudeau anymore right now. Um, but Polyev has to do this to secure the leadership, a big number in the leadership review. Is that right? Does he need
Hang
to
on,
do that?
wait. You left a big part out of the drama. What about Dmitry Sudis?
What about Dmitry Sudis?
Well, he intervened publicly. Was he speaking? We'll have to ask Kory
We'll
on
have
behalf
to,
of
yeah.
former Prime
Well,
Minister Stephen
I thought
Harper.
somebody on behalf of the Prime Minister, Harper, issued a statement saying that Dmitry was not speaking on his behalf and
Right,
did
but if
not
he was
reflect
speaking
his
on
views.
his behalf, wouldn't you have someone set up to say, of course, he's not speaking on our behalf, just to make certain that you're away from it, even though you're completely behind it all?
All right. Well, we'll get
Circles
to you,
within
Scott.
circles.
We'll
Yeah,
get to
you'll get your moment.
As a boy growing up in the shadows of the grain elevators of Prelate, Saskatchewan, I didn't foresee myself demystifying the details of AI. But 60 plus years on, here we are. This is on behalf of our presenting sponsor, TELUS, who, you conscientious hurly-burlyites will know, just opened their new sovereign AI factory in Rimouski. Let's start here. What exactly is a sovereign AI factory? And how does it differ from a traditional AI data center? Think of it as the difference between owning your own house with a really cool kitchen you can create in versus just renting a prefab storage container to hold all your stuff. An AI data center only provides the infrastructure, like servers and storage, but an AI factory is a complete AI development ecosystem, or state-of-the-art AI kitchen, to stay with that metaphor, which means it's got the storage you need, but it also has all the cutting-edge technology, so you can create new AI models from scratch or customize existing ones to meet highly specific needs, and then deploy them in your business operations, all on a single platform. A complete processing service, in other words, and a unique opportunity for Canadian business to be AI creators right here at home, rather than just piggybacking on another nation's prefabricated AI models and renting space in their servers, which may make it subject to their laws, even when the data center is located here. With TELUS's factory, they own the servers, operate the infrastructure to meet their clients' needs, control all the routing through their pure fiber channels, and manage the whole process under Canadian jurisdiction. Sovereignty by design. It's baked right in. Next week, I promise you more AI demystifying from TELUS and blessedly fewer kitchen metaphors from Herle.
I just want to answer your first question, which is about whether people care about Trudeau. And judging by the responses to Scott's jokes about Katy Perry and Trudeau last week, I'm going to go with a hard no on that. So we have field tested that, Polyev. You can lay it down. It's done. Yeah, I mean the question of why he wants to do this, and I mean I'd like to circle around to it, but I think first we also have to point out that this was not a one-off. This is the latest in a series of very Trumpy moves, tips, nudges, dog whistles, whatever you want to call it. You know, over the last few weeks alone, we've seen him raging against DEI again. So jumping on that, which of course, you know, if you think back to an eternity ago in January, in the early days of the Trump administration, what was one of the first things Trump did as an executive order? It was go after DEI. This stuff is very Trump coded. It's also not the first time, by the way, that he's said wacky stuff around the justice system, which is funny in a week where we're talking about bail reform, we're talking about criminal justice reform, we're talking about rising public concern on crime. He was out going after the sentencing of the convoy leaders in Ottawa, just like a complete weirdo, doubling down on that stuff. So I think, you know, I too have heard the theory that this has to do with his leadership review. I don't buy it. The people who share his politics on this, and again, we're not talking about even the majority of people within the conservative voting universe. That's about 20 to 25% of that group of people likes this shit. Okay. But not most of them. It's not where his universe is. It's not even where really the core of his vote is either, if you look at the last election. But those people are already supportive of Poilievre. And there's really, if they are in the Conservative Party and they are going to be turning up in Calgary in the dead of winter, they already agree with him. So there's no reason for him to do that to kind of mobilize anything. And in fact, I would actually argue by repeatedly hitting these notes, he's actually pushing himself into a different dangerous spot, which is that he seems so wacky, so incapable of learning the lessons from the last campaign, that he may actually force some organization against him from more moderate conservatives. Like there's actually, I would say, more of a danger on that flank than there is a benefit for him in mobilizing members and supporters ahead of the leadership vote on this. So that is, I think the reason that he does it is number one, because he believes it, and number two, because he enjoys it. He likes it. And you can see that in that this is an instinct for him. He returns to this, particularly in these longer format interviews, where he is like, these are fringe outlets where he is not being asked difficult questions. He is being invited into a very specific worldview. And he likes hanging out there. It's very online. And it is absolutely running completely counter to the things that the Conservatives have been doing that are actually useful for them. You know, I had a laugh because we know, like, this week they're coming out, they're going to do an opposition day on the job loss around Stellantis and the auto workers. Like, that is the fucking issue to be on. But instead, everyone's talking about this because it's insane. So the question for me is, yes, you know, we've started to see some Harper conservatives come out and criticize this. And, you know, and I will include Kory in this camp. And I know he's got a lot to say about it. But what is his caucus going to do? Are they going to sit tight? Are they going to go along with this and continue to go along with it, even though I am willing to bet there are a bunch of people on those benches who are really fucking uncomfortable with this, both because they think it's crazy and slightly anti-democratic, which it is, to go against the police in this manner. And secondly, because it is taking them off the messages that are more useful for them, that are where any vote growth is going to happen. So what's going to happen there? And so those are the things that I'm really interested in seeing over the next few days.
Kory, is he in trouble in the review?
I don't think so. I don't think so.
So then no need to be doing this kind of stuff then.
Yeah, there's no need to be doing it. I largely agree with what Jordan said. Like, I think where the risks for him are on the leadership is more with people asking the age-old question of, like, are you able to win? Right? Winnability is the ballot question in every leadership race and in every leadership review. And so I don't get the, you know, attacking to the or pandering to the fringes, especially for him in this context, especially if it's something that sounds really Trumpy, which, as we've discussed many times before, I think is the heart of what really killed him in the last election, with a lot of voters who traditionally vote conservative, who did not vote for him as a conservative leader. I think it was a mistake. I think it'd be a mistake to read strategy into this. Like, I think it's probably along the lines of what Jordan said. I think there's some muscle memory there, and
So a lack of discipline.
Yeah, natural predilection for this kind of stuff. That said, like, part of what he said, I actually think you and Scott would agree with, that the RCMP can be a bit political sometimes. I do think that is an actual thing, and if I think the two of you could probably go on at some length of historic examples of that happening. You know, Ralph Klein and
very clever play, because you know, if you get me talking
Ralph
about Zaccardelli, my fucking head's going to burst, and I won't allow anybody else to speak for 2 hours.
Yeah, so the Goodell thing was, like, very, 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 very political.
But Zaccardelli would, to be clear though, I think Zaccardelli was operating as a rogue agent in that
sure
thing. And Poilievre was casting a wider brush about the institution.
Like, these are very different. Right? Yeah.
I've got a lot of criticism for the RCMP on a lot of fronts, and you know, we could probably do a whole episode on it. I'm not saying there's some conspiracy though. Like I don't think I would go that far. I don't think most
If we
Canadians
were
would.
putting PMs in jail, we wouldn't start with the fucking Aga Khan vacation.
No, no, we would not. No, we would not. And look, like it's not like there haven't been investigations of prime ministers. Like the Mulroney stuff is been pretty well litigated over the years. But here's the big problem with it, and it's something we talk about all the time. It's staring at the rear view mirror instead of staring at the windshield of the car. And you know, you're going to get in a lot more accidents staring at the rear view mirror than you are if you're looking at the windshield. The next election is not going to be about Trudeau. It's not going to be about litigating, you know, what happened on a vacation that Trudeau once took. It's not going to be litigated on the SNC-Lavalin affair, or Jody Wilson-Raybould or any other, you know, minor political misdeed of the Trudeau era. It's going to be litigated on trade with the U.S. It's going to be litigated on affordability and jobs and the economy and all the you know crime, which we're going to be talking about. That's the stuff that they need to stay focused on. And look, I think this is an unforced error. I think it's an unforced error that's made more easy by the media choices that they're making. Like, you know, what does it look like to me? It looks like pandering to the crowd. And, you know, you see candidates and political leaders do this all the time. You get into a room of people who, or in an interview situation with somebody who's got a point of view on something, and you tend to tilt a bit in that direction to curry favor with that audience. And I think that's what this is. I just don't understand why you would want to do that right now. Like, I think it's
that's right. The place he was, because he gets so comfortable in those places. I think he doesn't have to be on his game the way he might be if he's dealing with Vashi or something like that. He just settles in. Because the other thing is, I mean, if you watch the video, the interview, as opposed to just reading about it, it's also the tone and the physical posture.
Yeah.
He's moved into that apple eating, turn the assholery up to
Peacocking.
11 zone.
And you're totally right about that. He's so comfy with them. And I did watch the whole interview, and I think we should all note the irony that he spends the first chunk of it talking about how wonderfully disciplined his caucus is and how he's so careful. So anyway, which is like very funny. But here's the thing. He's not fucking new at this, guys. This is his whole professional career, is to be a politician, to be able to move and to communicate in these different spaces, aware of the fact that there's a fucking video recorder right there, and this goes on this thing called the internet where it will be read in different contexts. I would agree that is like maybe a defensible explanation if this were his first election, but we're so far from that.
Yeah, so he's not a good candidate. So we talk a lot on this pod nowadays about the pitiless world we all suddenly inhabit, and how the federal government no longer has the luxury of respecting or indulging, or however you want to put it, all the various competing rights and interests and entitlements out there in its struggle to keep our economy moving and Canadians working. One huge issue is labor stoppages. Most people don't know it, but after the costly BC port strike 2 years ago, the Minister of Labour investigated a new system of dispute settlement. An expert advisory group proposed a neutral third party that would step in before a strike or lockout, delaying any stoppage. If the two sides are not able to resolve their dispute in 60 days, the neutral party could recommend an agreement, but the public could be spared a punishing shutdown our economy can hardly afford. Our sponsor, CN, decided to do some serious polling on the subject. It hired Polera, which earlier this month surveyed 2,712 adult Canadians in 7 regions from coast to coast. The poll was done by phone. A sample like that carries a margin of error of 1.9%, 19 times out of 20. Bottom line, strong majorities of those surveyed view rail and air transportation and marine ports as essential to the Canadian economy. To that end, 72% of those surveyed supported the neutral third-party dispute settlement system. In fact, more than 80% of Liberal voters surveyed supported it. So did more than 70% of unionized workers surveyed. That's pretty solid support. Such a system, in other words, is widely seen as fair. Something else. About half of all the respondents, and they included Liberals, Conservatives, and New Democrats, said they see unions as a positive force in Canada and want their right to collective bargaining protected. But they also want balance. They want to see everyone work together. Scott.
Herle and I have had this experience, but I'm guessing others have over their life. And that is, if you get stuck in a tavern with more than 2 Leafs fans at once, you will inevitably get treated to the Doug Gilmour high stick, I've had too much to drink, bitch and moan session, where they go on and on and on about 1993 and fucking Kerry Fraser and the high stick on Gilmour, and that screwed them, and therefore the Leafs didn't get past fucking Gretzky and the LA Kings, and they went on to be.
And of course, they would have beat the Canadians if they got there. That would have been.
That's right. No, they don't even think about that. Right. And when those guys, when you hear the Leafs fans go into the Doug Gilmour high stick rant, they get themselves deeper and deeper into it, and they're more worked up and they're more angry and they're more certain that their bullshit is right, and they can't stop talking about it. They don't want to stop talking about it, and they say things that are outrageously untrue and ridiculous and against their own interests, but they don't care because they're all worked up. Well, Poilievre was a 93 Doug Gilmour high stick politician in this pod, and he loves talking about the Doug Gilmour high stick. He loves it. He loves talking about this shit because there are only 2 explanations. One is, as we've said, he's got to do it because it's strategically necessary in order for him to cultivate his base and to secure the leadership review. Or he can't help himself from doing it because, like the 93 Leafs fan, he's on and on and on about it. The irony, and Kory has made this point before, I think the thing that would worry me if I was a conservative is that they don't think they made a mistake. He does not think he's made a mistake. I mean, he listens to us. He's like, listen to all those mainstream conventional wisdom fuckwits going on and on and on. They're wrong. I'm right, which is another way of saying, since they will not say, oh, and the reason we're white is that we needed to do it in order to serve our base, because that would suggest a weakness. So that's not the reason they're right. They're right because our definition, our assumptions about how this plays with the vast majority and certainly the movable middle of the Canadian electorate, our assumptions are wrong and their assumptions are right. They think this is smart politics. They're going to assert that whether we like it or not, which can only mean that this continues to be an operation that is not guided by candid, objective, honest guidance, research, and analysis. It must, even if they have access to it, it must be guided by gut, and specifically Pierre Poilievre's gut and his willingness to indulge his gut. Whether it's
why is he even thinking about Trudeau? Why is he even thinking about Trudeau? Why does he hate Trudeau
he's
so
a
much?
93.
Why does he hate Trudeau?
Also, because you're gonna go back to the height of when you were gonna fucking
Why
win.
doesn't he hate Carney?
Right?
He should hate Carney. He shouldn't hate Trudeau. He was going to beat Trudeau.
Yeah, Carney's
Because
busy
the
reaching over and
Leafs
taking
fan-
weapons out of his hands every fucking day.
Well,
The 93 Leafs fan doesn't talk about the opponents they have today. They comfort and cradle themselves in the fictitious history that they would have crushed if it hadn't been for Kerry Fraser and that non-call. In the same way that he is returning to that lovely time of 8 months ago, when if he'd had his hands around Trudeau's throat, much like Katy Perry does now, in a very different way, he would have ended him. And so but since it's not strategic, it must by definition be emotional, and they will insist that they're right and they're wrong. And that is real cause for trouble, because he's going to have 5 or 6 critical judgments to make between now and the next election day. And if they're not going to be guided by objective analysis, they're going to be guided by his gut. And there's no evidence that it's right.
Okay, so here's the Herle analysis, which is that the Conservatives are considered by most Canadians to be better at dealing with the cost of living than the Liberals, better at dealing with crime than the Liberals, better at dealing with immigration than the Liberals, better at dealing with almost all of the issues that are at the top of the priority list for Canadians. And the only reason why the polls are competitive or the Liberals slightly ahead is because people vastly prefer Mark Carney to Pierre Poilievre. And so if people liked Pierre Poilievre, they'd win the next election in a walk whenever it is.
Yeah.
Right. And so it 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 baffles me that he doesn't understand the fact that if he wants to keep this job and become prime minister, it's all on him to be something different than he's always been.
I think that's correct. That's what the issue is, right? It's likability on a relative basis between Carney and Poilievre. As we've talked about like so many times before, not just in relation to Poilievre, but candidates generally, it's hard to improve your likability if you're being very negative all the time. And and you got to pick and choose, which punches you're going to throw pretty carefully. Like I think there's some risks, if we want to go beyond this, just this one interview. Uh, the risks are looking like you're happy about bad news, right? So the Stellantis job stuff, like that can't be about, oh well, look at how poorly things are going. Mark Carney is worse than Trudeau. That whole narrative, I think, is just so wrong-footed. I think the narrative you got to be on is about the workers that are affected, and to be channeling, empathy and looking like, saddened and disappointed, and concerned and focused on the voters and the workers and the people who are really feeling pain and anxiety right now.
Yeah.
I think it's being less political, not more political, and it's certainly not about trying to sell things that people aren't buying. And here's something that people aren't buying: that Mark Carney is worse than Justin Trudeau. Like, you would be hard pressed to find a voter outside of his current caucus that doesn't think that would agree with that. And even then, like, they might prefer Trudeau, but they probably don't think that Trudeau is better than Carney. So, like, I think there's some things they gotta switch the sales pitch on, and I think they just need to soften it. I don't think this is strategy. I think this is a unforced error, and I think they largely view it as an error.
Right. Boy, just speaking of
wait,
that,
hang on.
Yeah, I mean,
you added quite a little tag there at the end. What makes you think they think of it as an error? Who's they?
Well, people I've chatted with there.
Okay.
well, I think the
Still have to
question
have a they.
is,
That's reassuring to hear.
does he think of it as an error? Because
I think so.
well, that would be a change, because I think one of the challenges for him over the last few months is you really haven't seen them go a long way in diversifying the voices coming out. It's still him. He's still, very front and center. It's not necessarily become a more team-like approach. And the question is, does he have a mode other than grievance politics?
Right. This year, our sponsor, the Canadian Climate Institute, is celebrating its 5th anniversary. 5 years of first-of-its-kind research that has helped shape the national conversation on climate policy in this country, always with a focus on practical, independent policy advice to decision-makers of all stripes across the country. That's a critical part of their work. These are some of Canada's most complex climate and energy issues. How they turn out matters greatly to people's lives, their day-to-day well-being, their physical safety, the future of their communities. The Institute's mission has been to help the country drive clean economic growth, adapt to climate change impacts, and decrease the heat-trapping pollution that's accelerating those damages. The Institute marked their 5th year with an event in Toronto last week with a diverse group of supporters and collaborators. Academics and experts, business people, Indigenous leaders, and political representatives from across the spectrum from all orders of government. One aspect that makes the Institute so unique in Canada is its network of independent experts across different fields of research in post-secondary institutions. It's built into their organizational DNA, expert panels that review all major research reports, providing input and feedback throughout the research process. They also have an advisory council, which includes a wide range of industry experts who provide practical input on their work. As I mentioned, this has led to a long list of first-of-its-kind research, First of its kind research on the impact of extreme weather on Canada's economy. First to detail Canada's economic prospects in the global energy transition. First to give an early estimate of Canada's national emissions, and first to show the impact of climate disasters on new housing. Without this work, our national policy discussion would be less informed and considerably worse off. So with that, please join me in wishing the Canadian Climate Institute a happy 5th birthday.
You're seeing a lot more interviews from a lot more people. Like I do think I do think they're actually trying to do that, and I think
their media strategy's changed a lot, and it's more open and transparent. But he's
still the beginning and the end of the messaging.
He's when you make a misstep like this one, you draw the cameras to you, and like I don't think that's that's intentional. I think it's a mistake, and mistakes happen. But like I don't think it's like, if this is their strategy, then they're then I have trouble explaining the other things that they're doing. Like, I think they're trying to change their strategy, but I think there's pre-existing impulses, kind of what you were talking about, Jordan, that pull them off track, and there are environments where that happens more often than not, because there is some pandering going on.
Well, but then your little tag there at the end, though, is a direct response to what I was suggesting, and I would be reassured by that if I was a conservative, because I'd be watching. Because if they think, and if he thinks it was a mistake, well, then the obvious thing to do is, like the Leafs 93 fans,
the learning experience for all
out of the tavern. Then you'll kind of go, well, I'm not going to put myself in that position where I'm going to drink too much and talk about 93 for the 100th fucking time.
Yeah, I just don't see any benefit in hanging out in that environment in the current context, because like I really do think the ballot question, if they are concerned about the leadership vote, and I don't think there's a bunch of reasons to be, because I don't see anyone really organizing on the other side. I would.
Which, Kory, by the way, when nobody's organizing, it raises the threshold of what's an acceptable number. If people are organizing, it's okay to get 70 something. But if people aren't organizing, it's not okay to get 70 something.
I would agree with that. Like, look, there's definitely grumbling out there, but the grumbling isn't about boy, that Poilievre isn't right wing enough for the party membership or the party base. It's exactly where you were, David, in terms of the criticism, which is we would be winning if not for the likability gap, the favorability gap between Carney and Poilievre, and that's the ball they got to be focused on if we want to use a baseball analogy, given what's going on out there. That's the ball they got to be focused on.
The problem with this in general terms is that Carney is genuinely likable and Poilievre is genuinely not likable. So it's a different.
Look,
I say, boy, you're the problem.
Well,
the head doesn't like you.
I don't think anyone's ever accused Harper of being likable, and I would say there's pretty substantial likability gap between Paul Martin and Harper. So like, it depends what people are focused on.
Yeah, but the difference between Carney and Poilievre is not just likability; it is also an impression of what they'd be what they're about.
Yeah, well, it's like who he's hanging out with.
It's a mega.
He's putting himself in these circumstances where he's hanging out with the apple chomping fringe, right?
Well, you don't want to look like Trump, right? Like that. Like, we can all agree on that. Anything that you say or do that looks like you're in MAGA territory is radioactive right now in Canada. And so I think that's probably the worst part of it, right? It's not that, I don't know, maybe I wasn't saying it quite appropriately, but like, it's not like criticism of the RCMP is the problem. There's lots of criticism of the RCMP out there on lots of different things. And I think that's a conversation.
Saying that your political opponent should have been in jail.
Yeah, that's the part. And why is that the part that stings? It's because it sounds like Trump, right? It's not the RCMP criticism. Who cares, right? Like, you can do that. It's should you be retroactively sending the cops after former prime ministers, and that sounds very, very Trumpy, and very Trumpy is bad.
Lock her up.
Always. Right.
Right. In case you haven't noticed, there's a quiet revolution happening in how we use and move money. Technologies like blockchain, stable coins, and decentralized finance are giving new meaning to how we think about currency. And now something new is emerging: agentic commerce. That's where AI agents act autonomously on your behalf to make purchases and manage subscriptions. Sounds convenient, right? Well, it is. And it's also a chance to set the standards for security and privacy Canadians expect, and to build sovereign digital platforms that reflect our priorities as a country. Here's where our sponsor Interact comes in. For 40 years, Canadians have trusted services like Interact Debit and Interact e-Transfer to move money safely, reliably, and at some of the lowest costs in the world. Now Interact is working with policymakers, financial institutions, and innovators to build homegrown solutions and ensure the next generation of digital money runs on Canadian infrastructure. Because the future of money isn't just about new technology. It's about trust, access, and keeping innovation rooted right here in Canada. Hey, let's do our clipping, which is an actual video clip or audio clip, and I presume we're going to play it now, from Rahm Emanuel.
I mean, if you're thinking of the world, I mean, say this, and this will be you'll try to end the interview right around about now. Look,
it's impossible for you to say anything more offensive than the U.S. ambassador says every day. So
yeah, well, let me say this, Cam. You haven't been spending the money you should have been spending on defense.
Correct.
We've been carrying you. Okay? And I say that not in a hostile way, in the sense that you've been basically slumming it.
Yeah.
But you haven't carried your weight. You basically allowed us to carry. And here's the other thing. That's on you and it's on us, because we let you do that. We let you not get to 2% of GDP towards defense. We let you basically not participate at the full length of your partnership. Have you fought shoulder to shoulder with America in every war America has fought in the last century? Yes, 100%. We're lucky to have you as a neighbor and a friend, but you got to uphold your part of that friendship, and we should demand it. Now, there's things that we have done that you could say the same things on us, but so
friends can say. Wait a second. Friends can say what you're saying. Okay,
I agree.
And should have said that, and we should. And
Dr. Herle,
Canada's acknowledging this now, but
yes,
Trump doesn't want to be our friend.
I'm not defending him.
Yeah.
When I'm using this as an example to the point, which is when you say get back. No, I don't want to go back. I want to build to the future. So my attitude is I'm not looking at the rearview mirror. I don't want to hit reset and just go backwards. I want to go to the future. I think you've come to the conclusion you have an obligation to the international system, to the friendship, to do certain things that are different. And we have that as your friend also. And we're lucky to have you as our neighbor. But that neighbor requires both trust and partnership. And we got to do that.
The thing I took from this that I thought was interesting was it made me feel like even if Trump and MAGA went away and you had a very traditional Democrat like Rahm Emanuel in the White House, that the relationship with Canada and maybe the relationship with the rest of the world is not going back to what it was. That even people like Emmanuel think the world was taking them for a ride, and that they needed, that other countries, including Canada, should have been stepping up more on defense and stepping up more on other things, and that the whatever cushy little world we were in has changed no matter who the president is. That there's a attitude in the United States that is kind of America first right now. Scott, what do you think?
Yes, I think two different things. I don't reach the same sweeping conclusion you did off of the interview with Emmanuel, which, by the way, it was a great, fun, energetic conversation, as any conversation with that guy who I've ever heard with speak is always going to be energetic. But great on you that you managed to nab that interview. That was pretty cool.
Hey, shout out to Ian McKay. Ian McKay delivered that interview for us. So thanks, Ian.
Well, thanks, Ian. I guess I do think that something in the relationship has reached a point of no return. I don't think the Canadians, I think we'd all love post-Trump to go back to where things were. I don't know that we're ever going to feel that level of trust and comfort and assumption that we had before. I just think that, because if nothing else, I think we're going to go, but you guys put him back. Like, you guys returned him to office when you knew everything after January 6th. Like, you knew all of this and you returned him. So how can I ever feel comfortable? I think the interview in more narrow terms demonstrates you can't think about running for higher office in the United States right now without acknowledging and tacking into that wind. Will a Democrat president 2.5 years after they've been in power, if they're not held by the balls by a MAGA Congress, will they pursue a radically different course? Say, yes, you got to pay your dues on NATO, but will it be much more than that? I'm not so sure. But I think what has happened, it seems to me, is our vulnerability to capricious political decision-making in the United States, capricious policymaking. All of that has been exposed. And I think it's psychologically traumatic and economically terrifying. And I don't think that's going to go away. I'm not convinced that the Rahm Emanuels will actually govern. I think they'll govern a lot more like Obama than Trump. But I don't think this breach is going to be easily repaired. And by the way, I'm not so sure that we're going to see a Democrat elected president again.
Oh, I know that maybe.
I kind of think that this thing's moving in a certain direction.
We can have a separate conversation about whether Rahm Emanuel is the fucking savior of the Democratic Party.
Oh, he's not. He's not. He won't. He's not going to be the last man standing in that race.
Yeah, I was going to say my overwhelming takeaway from the interview was maybe a little bleaker on that front, but.
He's one of us running for president. It doesn't make sense, as much as he's always wanted to be that.
Well, I was listening to Gretchen Whitmer when she was in town. I don't know, what was it, 2 weeks ago or something, and for all the happy talk about Canada and trade and what great friends we are and very nice warm embrace, she was still talking about shutting down Line 5, which would essentially shut off the economy in southwestern Ontario. And like, we have problems with the United States, and they are not limited to Trump. And the criticisms around Canada being a free rider when it comes to continental security or helping with missions overseas or you name it is not new. And it has come from both sides of the aisle over multiple presidencies. The difference is there is sharpness to the Trump stuff that is backed up by tariffs and a bunch of other things, right? Like, it's, but the criticism isn't new. Like, it's been around for a long time, right? Like, you talk about Golden Dome. Well, you guys were dealing with Paul Martin, intercontinental ballistic missile defense, right? Like, these things are not new, right? They're not new. It's just the gripes are more pointed, and they come with consequences that we have not experienced in the past, and so it's different that way. But it's not rolling back. I totally agree. It's not going back to normal, or what it was in the last 60 years.
Well, economically, Jordan, I mean, the Democrats have always been the protectionists. I mean, the free trade agenda was driven by the Republican Party, not by the Democratic Party, right? And so now that the Republicans are not free traders, there presumably are no free traders in the United States.
Not only not free traders, but literally pulling down the entire system from the inside. Like, there is a never-ending irony that the Democrats, as the party of workers, failed to protect American workers from international free trade, and that now you're seeing the Republicans sort of reap what they sowed and take it down. But and I think that I was struck in the interview, like, to me, it wasn't really very different even from what we heard from the Biden administration. Like, if you don't even want to go that far back to having Democrats criticize Canada on the failure to meet the 2% target, like, the discussion in the US through multiple administrations has really been just, do we shame Canada publicly or do we shame Canada privately? And if you recall, like, back in the summer of 2024, what actually pushed Trudeau to even lay out a timeline to the 2% target? Well, it was the threat that Biden was gonna publicly call Canada out in a more serious way. So that, that dynamic, I think, has been there for a very long time. I don't see it changing, and by the way, the Europeans were also none too happy that Canada hasn't been living up to that commitment either. So I don't think there's any going back on that. But what I would observe, and like what is like more interesting, is how the domestic politics around that issue in Canada have changed, right? Like, what was the reason that we didn't get to 2% previously? Well, it was because that there was no stick in Canada pushing politically for that and for the kind of economic trade-offs that would be required to increase our defense spend that way. And the thing that shifted that in the end was not a threat from Russia or any sense that our military is incapable of actually mounting missions because we underfund them, both of which are real things, by the way. It was the threat from Donald Trump that actually mobilized public support around greater defense spending. So there's an irony here in that these things kind of mutually reinforce themselves in terms of what becomes politically possible in Canada to actually meet some of that pressure that's coming from the United States.
All right, let's move on to our last topic, which is crime and bail reform. So the Prime Minister made an announcement last week about a lot of changes. Some people, like the Civil Liberties Association, think they go way too far. Some people think they don't go nearly far enough. I am gratified, pleased to see that it's a political impulse, that the government responded to a political demand with something resembling a political response to it. But Kory, is this what they announced going to put this issue away politically for them? Because it's been a very damaging issue. It probably cost them a majority in the election campaign.
I think there's little doubt it cost them the majority. If you're looking at issues where they really shit the bed, this is a big one. And if you look at where that happened, it lines up very nicely with where we're seeing this crime wave of home invasions and auto thefts. Like, it's, there are certain neighborhoods in the GTA where you can't escape this conversation no matter who you're talking to, because everybody knows somebody who's been affected, or they're, it's this 2 streets over, or it's like, Scott, you've had multiple vehicles stolen, right? Like, it's an issue because it's a fucking issue, right? Like, that's why it's a thing. Look, I think there are some areas where they're just never going to go. The Liberals are just never going to go. So mandatory minimum sentencing, that's going to require using notwithstanding clause. They're never going to go there. And the Supreme Court's been pretty clear that if you're not taking that approach, like, it's going to be thrown out. So there's some things that folks out there would like to see, like mandatory minimums that are probably not going to be part of the package. There are other things that I think are very sensible that they're talking about doing, right? You've got to change bail to a prove you're going to be safe if you get it, as opposed to reverse onus, or whatever the correct term is. I think that's sensible, and that should be applied to areas where we're having
I think when I was in law school, I would have been outraged by that.
Really?
I think that the reverse onus, the notion that you have to establish.
Wait, listeners should know that David was 44 when he was in law school. I just want
to. I don't know. I mean, listen.
Because you think it was when he was
I think
it
makes good sense politically, and maybe it makes good sense policy-wise, but it is antithetical to civil liberties for sure.
Well, okay. But look,
Kory brought a gun to a knife fight.
Fuck those things.
What's the purpose of, let's just go back to the very core things that the federal government needs to do in the minds of the public. One is manage the criminal justice system, right? Like, they have sole responsibility for the criminal code, and people are not feeling safe. And they are not feeling like what we're doing right now is working. And so you have to be very fucking ideological to say that we're not going to make changes that keep the bad guys behind bars. one of the other areas where I'll be watching is what are we going to do around the Young Offenders Act? Because there's an idea
It's
that
called the Youth Criminal Justice Act, and it's been
right.
called the Youth Criminal
Okay.
Justice Act for
I call it the
25 years.
I call it the Young
It
Offenders
was.
Act still. Uh,
Today, my part on the
Because
podcast
everybody
will be
hates
played
the
by
Young
David
Offenders
Herle.
Act, which
well,
is why we changed the name to the Youth Criminal Justice Act,
well,
hoping people like you would think it was more strict and severe.
Well, it isn't. But what it does do, I don't think it's compassion for younger offenders. I think it is an incentive by organized crime to recruit kids into their criminal network, because that's what's happening on auto theft.
Yeah.
And so, like, do you think that that's more compassionate? Like, I think, we want to be, preventing that cycle from continuing. And there are, this isn't like, lock people up and throw away the key. This is, how do we disrupt the criminalization, the organized criminalization of youth? Like, it's not a good thing. So, but I understand that there's a lot of ideology around this stuff, for liberals in particular. Like, and I wouldn't even say the left. I wouldn't even say progressives. I would say liberals have a lot of hangups around this stuff that are divorced from the lived experience that people are having out there right now. And so I think it's good that they're doing something on it. And I think politically they need to do something on it. But I think, like, it's good to be doing something on this if you want to maintain the confidence of the public around what is an absolutely fundamental core responsibility of government.
Jordan.
Well, I think if you're in a minority government and you're not sure how your votes are going to tally up for a budget that's coming in a couple weeks, it's probably good insurance to get out on this vulnerability before all those things go down. I think this is politically for the government. It's fine. They need to do it. They need to address this issue.
I need to stop you and ask you something that's more important than whatever it is we're talking about, which is, do you actually think there is a snowball's chance in hell that the government falls on the budget?
I would say there is a 90% chance this budget passes fine, but then I would
90.
say accidents happen.
90's
Accidents happen.
Yeah, I would say high.
and I think this is a government who has shown themselves to be very unwilling to negotiate and dialogue with opposition parties, and that comes with risks when you don't have all the votes. Yeah. So we'll see, right?
Back to this.
Back to this. So yeah, look, politically, I think this is fine. I think, most of what you're hearing from the Conservatives in response to this is this doesn't go far enough. And I can say, as a seasoned New Democrat, that is rarely an effective argument when your opponent is taking on the core of an issue that you feel is essential to your brand. Most voters don't really care about that. Now, then we can have a separate conversation about whether this is going to be effective. And I will briefly indulge in some facts on this. And look, and there is a problem with our bail system. You do have violent offenders who are getting out and getting bail clearly when they shouldn't be. But what I would say is that some of the measures and the things that the government's hanging their hat on here, like we already have reverse onus bail for lots of violent offenses. So the difference that this is going to make, it's unclear whether that is going to make a meaningful difference. But on the other end of the bail system, there also is a problem. So I'm talking about nonviolent offenses where we have people who are in jail for violating bail conditions. These are predominantly low-income people who are addicted to drugs, Indigenous offenders. And these folks now make up the vast majority of the prison population in Canada. Like around 80% of people who are held in provincial jails are there for remand. They're legally innocent. And do you want to know what is where people get recruited into criminal networks? It's in jail, friends. So there's a problem on the other end of the bail system. And this is also tied to provincial administration of justice. The system is absolutely gummed up on a whole number of levels. But if we want to really talk about effective bail reform, you can't just do half the equation. So I would say politically, I give this a pass. Fine, it's good. This is like a basic thing the government needs to do to address a vulnerability. But in terms of effectiveness, I don't think it's really going to get where they need to go.
Well, Scott, then, What's the point of it? Because frankly, an announcement only gets you a headline, and then, I mean, either they address the problem, but if people are still getting their car stolen, still getting carjacked, in their house, then this won't have solved the issue. So it needs to be effective.
Well, yeah, but there's oh, okay, fuck. When you put it that way. But let me start with this. I like two things about this, and they're superficial, pure political and communications things. One, I've been a little critical from time to time on this pod about the way in which the Carney government has rolled out things. And I thought that this was well telegraphed and managed. I thought that, they told us it was coming. Yeah, lost in the shuffle was you had a federal, provincial, territorial meeting of justice ministers and public safety ministers last Friday on the 15th. And it was, or whenever it was, last Thursday, something like that. And the prime minister, they timed this announcement to coincide with that. So instead of a stream of justice ministers from every province going to the microphone and generating news about how the public safety minister hasn't got this right, and the justice minister's a weakling, and everyone sounding like Pierre Poilievre and agreeing with Poilievre and disagreeing with the government, they bigfooted that with the prime minister coming in saying these are the measures, and they respond to the top line demand of what are they did not try to convince people that the issues they think are a problem are not a problem. They said we are picking the right problems and we're trying to deal with those problems. That to me showed more acuity than they've shown on a bunch of other major rollouts. So I liked all of that. It bigfooted this stuff and it succeeded. We saw nothing about that FPT. They dominated the airwaves. They got the headlines and news they wanted. Now they're going to introduce the bill. The prime minister's off in Asia, but they're going to have to find ways to maintain that, push back on that. I would say even the civil liberties pushback helps them because it allows them to triangulate on this issue. And the second thing I like about
it's the evidence they're tough enough.
That's right. So the second thing I like about it is that it forces Poilievre into a place where Kory was talking about, which I think is dangerous for them, which is not good enough. We have to go even harder. We have to tie people to a post at the center of town and just wail on them with kitchen pots until crime is stamped out. And I think that's going to make people uneasy. You start saying, you know what, we would introduce mandatory minimums for everything, and we'd use a notwithstanding clause, and we do so preemptively. I know Kory's got a take on this, but my view is that would not be wise positioning. So they are encouraging Poilievre to go beyond this, the sort of center of the political demand, the 905. I'm worried about carjacking. I'm a soccer mom. I'm worried about crime kind of place, and go to something more extreme. So I think all of that is well orchestrated. And I don't think they've orchestrated things always so well. So kudos. On the issue more broadly, their job can't be to make the problem go away. In all honesty, David, the political project has to be to neutralize it from being the sort of thing that denies you in the last days of a campaign a majority like it did last time. You've got to do enough on it that you neutralize it or denude it, and they're not done yet. So they're going to have to sustain this. How do they talk about it? How do they deliver on it? How do they deal with the opposition? How do they get through committee? It's a minority government, don't forget. Like, it isn't just Carney standing in front of microphones. Like, it is a minority government, and they can give you fits in committee. So they got to manage and all that. But so far, so good, in my view.
All right. Let's swing this around to our Hey Yous. Gordon Pinsent, assemble the group.
Ladies and gentlemen, please return to your seats. The Hey Yous are about to begin.
Okay. Jordan, give us a Hey You.
So my Hey You is once again going out to Carney. All my free advice goes unheeded, so I'm going to keep trying. And this week it's about the trade strategy. So this was a bad week we just.
I know you're going to be critical, but your eyes are showing affection. They really are.
It's the love. David, that's because I want him to succeed. I do. I want us to all fucking win here. Okay, but. The problem is, it is a team sport. And so my Hey You this week, going out to Carney, going out to Don LeBlanc, all the people who are fucking sweating spinal fluid to get some sort of an agreement with the United States. Granted, this is a very difficult situation. Everybody understands that. But what the government is doing in terms of their communication around the stakes of this and preconditioning with stakeholders about what is happening in these talks is not good. They have got to start to broaden the tent. They need to be pulling in stakeholders from industry, from labor, premiers, other party leaders. You need to talk to these people now. You need to get them on board, explain to them what's happening. You need to share your thinking about where this is going. These people, yes, some of them are going to criticize you, but many are going to be able to help and to build bridges in the places you need to build bridges to get some political success out of this in the end. Going and doing the work is unfortunately is not enough, because there are going to be winners and losers here, and you need to have other people telling your story. I am sure that the Prime Minister is going to have 9 days of extremely interesting and productive meetings in Asia, but fucking off for the period immediately before delivering a budget in the midst of these trade talks, while we are literally visibly seeing thousands of jobs perhaps irreparably hemorrhaging to the United States, is not a smart move. And I really, really think they have to get a different communications approach around this that is built on actually sharing information, not on keeping everything inside until something is done.
Interesting. Okay, cool. Thanks. Kory.
Well, I'm going to do one to Wob Canoe.
I'm going to be talking to Wob Canoe at the Empire Club in Toronto this week.
I'm going to be watching you talk to Wob Canoe at the Empire Club later this week.
It's part of my thinking. This is actually a hey you to David. Hey, talk to Wob Canoe about this. Look, I think he's in a really interesting position, and I think there's as contrasted by David Eby and a very hardline approach on pipelines and the rest. Canoe is actually advocating for a pipeline to Churchill, and I think there's a desire to have a pipeline to, we talked about Line 5 earlier, to Sarnia on the part of the Ontario government. I think that's a big project that those two provinces could work on together, and I think they could kind of show the way a little bit for the other premiers as to how to work together and get big things done for all of Canada, and
use some steel,
and use some Ontario steel. Look, I'm a big Wob Canoe fan. I think he's got a ton of political game, and I think he's been really strong on the trade stuff. And I see this as a huge opportunity to sort of build on that. And so, hey, Wob, I think you should take the leadership position in the NDP of showing how provinces can work together to get big shit done.
You can't have him, Kory.
I think there's a new pod actually that could spiral out of air quotes media, David. The Hey Wob. I think it could be like a kind of a lifestyles, maybe romance advice kind of thing. Hey Wob, my ex-husband wants me and my new girlfriend to come over for dinner. Is that a good idea? Hey Wob, how do I build a pipeline to the frozen north?
Oh my God, Scott, that would be such a great show if you were the star of it.
I would.
Hey, advice from Scott.
Hey Scott.
Hey Wob. No, I think it requires the Wob.
Yeah.
Man.
You got a hey you?
I do have a hey you. It's going to make Kory squirm. I hope. I don't know. I'm going to zag. I know the whole world is zigging. The whole world's been zigging for a while against Trudeau. I'm just going to zag and say October 19th just passed. It's the anniversary in 2015 of the Trudeau majority win. And, we'll have to see how history settles. But my God almighty, coming from third, finishing in first, tacking to the left. I give David a lot of credit on this, tacking to the left of the NDP and Tom Mulcair on the deficit and resurrecting the party with a combination of shrewd political choices, gathering a great team, the power of his surname, personality, and charisma, harnessing all of that, throwing weed out as an issue that demonstrated you were a change agent and maybe stirred some of the youth vote, like all of it. It was a hell of a campaign. It was a hell of an accomplishment. And people forget that the Liberal Party was on its back and sucking a ventilator prior to his arrival. Before 2013, it was in trouble. And people were saying, well, they must merge with the NDP. This is the only survival strategy. The centrist party that is the Liberal Party might vanish like Britain or Saskatchewan. And it was an astonishing victory and accomplishment. So I just want to mark it because nobody likes to say a good word about Trudeau these days.
Yeah, I'm going to pick up where you left off with my Hey You. I really noticed it this weekend that nobody commented on this except him. And it's amazing how much of a consensus verging on unanimity, it appears, is in the country now that those were 10 completely lost years and that we don't even want to think about them anymore and we desperately need to move on from them. But I don't really think that's how that government's going to be viewed in retrospect. I think the economic record is obviously going to come in for some very hard judgment. But, they did more for Indigenous reconciliation than any government in history has done. They're on the historic right side of the climate issue, no matter how bad the politics of that were. They handled COVID well, in my view, and they renegotiated the NAFTA. And, the thing I always think about is the child benefit, which was absolute life-changing policy for an awful lot of people in Canada, and lifted so many people, especially kids, out of poverty. So anyway, I think there are things that people are going to look back on and say, it wasn't that bad. But right now, it's got to be lonely for him out there politically. All right.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, that's our...
Hey, just before we go, can I mention, Kory, I don't know if you're aware of this, but to folks who are on YouTube, for this entire pod, Baby Yoda's been wandering in and out of your screen. I don't know what's going on back there, but...
Nicole is in the UK, and I'm in Saskatchewan for work, and so I have brought our little dog, Bernie.
You have a hotel dog?
I have a dog. I have a dog.
Your hotel dog. Here. You're one of those crazy old Vanderbilt ladies. I have a hotel dog.
People see Kory in town on his scooter carrying the dog under his arm.
You have to show the dog. Now we all have to meet the dog.
There goes the right-wing architect.
You got to show the
Canada.
dog now, Kory.
Where's Bernie?
Yeah, where is Bernie? I don't know. She's
all right.
There's Bernie. There's
There's Bernie.
Baby Yoda.
Look at that. Star of the show. All right. I'd like
Very
to thank
good.
all of our sponsors who make this show possible. I want to thank the three of you for being here with me, and all of you accursed out there. And Gordon Pinson, God bless you for having done our voiceover. So much fun that exists. All right. See you next week with more of the Curse of Politics. In the meantime, take care of yourselves.